kaymade-tech again with new videos. All right. So we went on a journey in the previous videos, and what we did was to install and configure our own personal home cyber lab. Today we'll be looking at what we can do now that we have a cyber lab. All right. So just a recap. In our previous videos, we installed the Oracle Virtual Box Manager. That is where the virtual machines will reside. And once we completed installation of the virtual box, we began to install various virtual machines. We installed the pfSense, Kali Linux, Ubuntu, Metasploitable 2, and the OWASP DWA. All right. So now that we have that, we have our virtual machines running. I believe you followed the process and you did have your own, you were able to create your own virtual environment. So now that we have that, what do we do with this? This is where the hands-on comes in. This is where the hands-on comes in. What do I mean? Now that you have a controlled environment, you can practice as like without getting into any legal troubles. You know, you can practice. Like as you can see my screen, I do have what we call the virtual box, and it's in a controlled environment, and it's secured because I'm using what we call the host only. Host only, what does that mean? We do not have access to the internet, but we can communicate with every virtual machine on this network. And the network here is 192.168.56.0/24. Okay, so that's the network. So that means every computer, every virtual machine that you see on the screen can communicate with each other, but they can't communicate with the internet. So I do not have access to the internet because, like I explained in my previous videos, we will be having vulnerable machines, virtual machines. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are all vulnerable. So that means if I get on the internet, it can be exploited and it can spread into my network and eventually get into the host. And that's what we call virtual machine escape. All right. So now that we have that, I did mention that I'm not sure if I can't remember if I mentioned it, but Nmap is pre-installed in Linux distribution. So we using Windows, are we left out? Not exactly. We ain't left out. So for Windows, all you just need to do is install, go to nmap.org and look for ZenMap. And once you get to ZenMap, if you download it and you install it, as you can see it here, it says the official cross-platform Nmap security scanner GUI. So once you go in here, go to downloads, it gives you, so for those of us using Windows, we have it here. Those of us using Mac and etc. So what we need to do now that we have Nmap, now that we have an understanding of Nmap, I will advise you also while you are here, click on the reference guide. Everything here, this table of contents, it gives you what Nmap can do. This is target specification, host discovery, port scanning, basic, port scanning, technique, port specification and scanning order, service and version detection, OS detection, script ng, so many things. And it gives us examples how you can run this. This is these are the various flags. So it tells you how you can run it. But let me pull up my Kali Linux. So with Kali Linux, if you just type in nmap, either -h, that's to help, it gives you all basically the same things that was written on that website. So we have target specification, host discovery, scan technique, and every of these flag does something. So that's what makes it interesting. And that's why you can't learn these things easily without having a controlled environment. Remember, you can't, Nmap is an active scan. So there's not supposed on network that you do not have authorization. So please do not do it on any network you don't have authorization. That's why once you follow the previous video, you could create your own organized environment. That way you won't get into any trouble when you run Nmap. Okay? So I'm assuming that every listener and those that are watching this video must have followed through the previous videos and they all have their home cyber lab. So we'll be able to move on because you have it. If you do not have it, pause here, go to the previous videos, configure your home lab, and continue here. So for those of us that have gotten to this stage, I'll just quickly briefly explain what Nmap does. So you might need to read it on your own, but I'll just pick out one or two things. So let's go to host discovery. What does it do here? For example, the SN says ping scan, disable port scan. So what this does is that, let's assume you're in an environment, you want to know how many hosts is up. Just type in SN and it gives you that option. So while we are here, let me pull up another machine. Okay. So let's use that Nmap SN and my subnet is 192.160/24. So it's going to tell me how many hosts is up. So as you can see here, it says 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. 1, 3, 4, 5. And that tells us, and all these hosts are up. Okay, so let's go back to Kali. So that tells us what that does. We also have what we call scan technique. Scan technique. You need to know what these things do. If you are about to write the Security Plus exams in CompTIA with CompTIA, you need to know this. If they ask you, hey, minus S and capital S, that's a TCP SYN scan. If they ask you ST, that's a TCP or connect scan. All right. SA is an acknowledgement scan. SU is UDP scan, etc., like that. So they all do something. It's necessary you know what they do, and that's why once you have this, it's something you could run different scans. Once you run different scans, you have an idea of what they all do. Then here is port specification. What does this do? It tells you that it talks about this port. What port do you want to run? And it gives us example here. So let's assume you run nmap minus P22. It tells us this 22 is SSH. It tells us that you are trying to discover if port 22 is open, right? And if you want to do a port range, you are also able to do that. And it gives you various examples. Service and version detection. What does this do? It tells us that we have these services and version that are running on the computer. I'm going to do a test for all of us here so we can see. So that tells us that, okay, let's assume I have port 22 open, which is SSH, that's the service. And it tells me the version. It's going to tell me it's open SSH 9 point something. It's going to give me the version. Then what else? The next one we have is the script scan. That is used for looking through the network to see if we have vulnerabilities to exploit. So we're going to run this scan with our Metasploitable or OWASP virtual machine. The next one is OS dictation. What does this do? This tells us the kind of operating system that we're using. Why is this important? See, if you are running, let's assume you are an ethical scanner, right? And you run this. What it tells you is that in security, with security tools, you have some tools meant only for Linux, and you have some tools meant only for Windows or Mac, right? So if you run this scan, for example, you come prepared. So let's assume you run this scan and you find out that the entire business uses Linux. You know the tools that you could use. If the entire business uses Windows, you know the tools that you use to work with this system. I mean, even if you're a blue team member, it's the same thing. It's important you know the tools that are needed so that you don't just get there and you now say, okay, what tool I'm going to use here? What's this? Oh, they use Linux. Oh, I came with tools for Windows. You understand? Timing and performance. Timing and performance does what it does is that it adds speed or it slows down the process. So if you want to run a scan, you have the capital T minus T 4 or 5 or 0 or 1. So it depends. If you have it starts from 0 is the slower and the higher gets to 5. Okay. Then we have firewall, IDS, evasion, and spoofing. This helps us to do various things, as you can see. It helps us to decoy. It helps us to, that's minus A, that spoof source address, iFace, use specified interface, so many things. Then we have the output. What does this mean? The output is just telling us here that when we run a scan, how do we want the results presented to us? Do you want it in an XML format? Do you want it in various formats available? It says output in three major formats at once. That's OA. So if you don't want it in any of those three various formats, you have the ON, OX, OS, and OG. So there are various formats. We have what next? Then we have miscellaneous. We have 6, which is enabling IPv6 scan, and we have A. A is very important. It's a go-to tool. Why did I say that? Because with A, it does so many things. So I'm going to run how many machines do I have? So I'm going to run 3 different scans to show you. So I'm going to run the A scan. I'm going to run the script scan. I'm going to run the SS scan. Okay, so I'm going to run those 3 on our Metasploitable 2 VM, and you can see the different outputs, what information it gives us. Okay, so let's start with clearing this. Then, okay, let me just clear this. So, sudo nmap. So this will run the script. All right. Okay, so that has started. So let me pull up my Ubuntu. What did I say I'll run here? I will run the SS. That's the TCP scan. Nmap s my sorry my metasploit. Right. So while that is running, let me bring up my window. Yeah, so as you can see, this is Nmap Zinmap. So I'll just click. So as you can see, we can do it on Windows. We can do it on. So for this is the A that has like 4 in one. So I put in 192.168.56.122. All right, before I go there, so the Nmap has pre-saved scans. So if you see something that you want to add, I mean, let's assume I don't want this to remove it, but if you want to add something to it, you just come here, profile, new, you give it description, you give it a name, and you give it Nmap flag. Okay, so let's cancel this. So now that so we are running different type of scan on what Metasploitable tool here. So we'll wait out so we can compare all the results. Awesome. So what do we have here? Nmap, the A flag, the T for time, and V for verbose. Verbose. So what does it give us? So this is one type of scan on the same IP address. So let's take a look at it. So it says it discovered all these port opens. It scanned 1,000 ports. That's the amount of port it normally scans. So this is how the ports open. So you can see why this is a very, very security risky machine because it has a lot of ports open. You shouldn't have this much port open, and you will notice that most of these ports have either expired or outdated services running, what makes it more vulnerable. All right, so port 21, as you see here, says FTP FS BS FTPD 234. That is a vulnerable version of this FTP, but we're going to see it in the other one. Um, this is 22 open SSH. So you see this, it gives us the port number, the protocol, the service, no, the state, the service, and the version. All right. So that's the same thing it gives here. Okay. So if you take a look at this, it's going to be similar to the the script scan. So let me pull up the script scan. Right. That's in our Kali. Up, all the way up. So the difference with this, it points it out that this service, this version is vulnerable. This is what we see here. Port 21 FTP dash VS FTPD dash backdoor. It is vulnerable to a backdoor, and that's why you see it vulnerable here. All right, let me just add this, but we're not going to go ahead of ourselves. What does this mean? What do we do with this information? So what we do with this kind of information is that if we are in a real life scenario or when we get attack stimulation, this is when this information comes in handy. What I mean here is that once you run a script scan and you notice that there are vulnerables, all you need to do is there's another application within Kali Linux and other ones. Even we we have to install it with Ubuntu and Parrot. It comes with Parrot also. So Parrot and Kali Linux are similar. They are more of an attacking ethical hacker tool, right? An ethical hacker software because most of these things are pre-installed. You don't need to break sweat or do anything to have it. Unlike Ubuntu, you need to still go ahead to run the installation of the app. Okay, so as I was going, so there's what we call metasploitable, and that is what we use to metasploit framework. I meant that's what we use to exploit every of these vulnerables we see. So as you see it here, it says it's vulnerable and it's exploitable. You see? So it's giving us that information that yes, this is vulnerable and we can actually exploit it. So as you can see, we have other vulnerable ones here. And just scroll through vulnerable, vulnerable. All right, then vulnerable. So we see that we have a lot of vulnerable services on this vulnerable version and services on this metasploitable, vulnerable, man in the middle, man in the middle vulnerability, SS injection, SSC injection, vulnerable, information leaks, vulnerable. So in the future, we are going to also run a vulnerable scan with some other vulnerability match tools, software. Okay, so now we have seen the result with Windows when we run the A flag. We have seen the results in Kali Linux when we run the script scan, and we'll look at Ubuntu. All right, so Ubuntu, this is what it gives us. So it tells us the open ports and the services, but it doesn't give us the version because this does not give us the version. So you see that you might be asked, even in Security Plus exam, what flag do you use that gives you both the state, this version, the service? And that's one of the reasons why you need to know all these flags. All right. So it tells us this is open. So it tells us as many as this. So from normally it's 8,000 that it TCP scan. So if you take 977 away from 1,000, I think that's about 23. Yeah, 23. So these are 23 services opened, and that's a lot. All right. So what you need to do now that you have your lab, you need to completely install. I mean, you need to run various scans. So I will encourage you to use the various flags in Nmap to run various scans to get an understanding on what these various flags does. It gives different outputs. It gives you a better understanding of what we were able and successfully ran three different scans. We ran with the SS, that's small letter S and the capital S. We ran with the A and we ran with the script scan. So you are able to view that it gives different outputs. So every of those flags, that tells us something, that every single flag gives a very different output, and it's there for a purpose. So when you develop more in this, you'll know that okay, for this I need to use this flag, for that I need to use this flag. So you'll be able to say, okay, for oh, I need to know what operating systems are on these computers in the office, in this network. All you just need to do is use the OS detection. Oh, I need to know the services and the version, SV. So what you need, you have a flag for it. Thank you so much, and look out for the next video.